On May 19th, an Iranian helicopter went down in the fog. 9 people died, including President Ebrahim Raisi, the foreign minister, and the head of the president's security detail. The official story is simple. Bad weather, an old American helicopter from the 1970s that Iran could never properly maintain after the revolution, a pilot who couldn't see the mountain. That's probably what will go down in history. And it's probably true. But probably is not the same as certainly. In this class, I want to walk you through a game theory analysis of who would have benefited from Raisi's death, because if you ask that question seriously, you end up somewhere uncomfortable. Not in Washington, not in Tel Aviv, inside Iran itself. Before we get to Iran, a methodological note. When you do history or analyze current events, you're always fighting 3 problems. First, information is scarce. The truth available to you is limited. Second, the information you do have may be false. Misinformation is everywhere. Third, there is always an official narrative, the one the government and the media publish. It may not be true, but it's the version most people will accept. What we know as fact is narrow. On May 19th, Raisi was in Azerbaijan for a dam opening ceremony. He boarded one of 3 helicopters to fly home. His helicopter crashed. The other 2 arrived safely. All 9 people on his helicopter died. Everything else is interpretation. So let's interpret carefully. The accident hypothesis is the strongest, and I want to be honest about that. Helicopter crashes happen. In 2020, Kobe Bryant died in one with his daughter. The aircraft Raisi was flying in was an old American model from the 1970s, and after the 1979 revolution, the United States refused to cooperate with Iran on maintenance. Decades of jury-rigged repairs on a complex machine, plus heavy fog, plus mountainous terrain, that's a sufficient explanation. This is the most probable cause. But game theory requires us to look at the alternatives. Could the United States, Israel, or even Azerbaijan have done this? The problem is opportunity and motive. Opportunity is hard. Staging an assassination of a sitting Iranian president inside Iran is enormously difficult. Motive is harder. Look at the precedents. In January 2020, Trump ordered the killing of General Soleimani in Baghdad. But Soleimani ran Iranian foreign policy across the Middle East and was a direct threat to American interests. Israel has assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists inside Iran. Motive: stop the bomb. On April 1st of this year, Israel struck the Iranian embassy in Damascus and killed 2 Iranian generals. Motive: those generals were coordinating with Hamas. Each of those operations had a clear, narrow motive. Killing the president of Iran does not. It carries enormous risk and unclear strategic gain. I'm not ruling it out, but the motive is thin. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Opportunity is no longer a problem. Domestic actors have access. Remember, Raisi flew with 2 escort helicopters that arrived fine. We don't know who was on board, but we can guess. Military escort. They could have protected him. They could also have done the opposite. So who inside Iran would have wanted Raisi dead? To answer that, you need to understand 3 things: the succession, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the politics of the past 45 years. Iran is an Islamic republic, which means ultimate authority rests with God and the Quran, and the Ayatollah is the one who represents God and Quran. He has ultimate veto power. The president is more like a CEO. Real power lives with the supreme leader. The current Ayatollah, Khamenei, is 85. Raisi was 63 and widely considered Khamenei's protege. Most observers expected that within 5 years or so, Khamenei would die and Raisi would become supreme leader. With Raisi gone, the leading contender becomes Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei. This creates a problem. Iranians overthrew a king in 1979. Hereditary succession is exactly what most Iranians oppose. If Mojtaba Khamenei becomes Ayatollah, the regime faces a legitimacy crisis. So, who would benefit from a Mojtaba succession, legitimacy crisis and all? To answer that, meet the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards. They are separate from the regular army, and the reason matters. In 1979, when Khomeini returned from exile to lead the revolution, he didn't trust the army. The army had sworn allegiance to the Shah. So he created a parallel armed force whose duty was not to protect the nation, but to protect the revolution. In effect, his private army. They had two functions. 1. Defend the Islamic Republic at home. 2. Export the revolution across the Middle East, to Syria, to Iraq, and beyond. That second function is why the region was so alarmed by 1979, and it's why Saudi Arabia, the United States, the Soviets, and others backed Saddam Hussein when he invaded Iran in 1980. The Iran-Iraq War was brutal. Many Iranians died. But the Revolutionary Guards held the line, and they emerged from that war as the most dominant military force in the country, with effectively unlimited access to funds. And that's where the corruption begins. Today, the IRGC is believed to control somewhere between 10 and 50% of the entire Iranian economy. Western sanctions matter. Iran can't easily sell its oil. But the deeper problem is monopoly. When one armed faction controls that much of the economy stagnates. You can read recent Iranian history as a series of protests against this monopoly, even when the protests didn't name it directly. 1999. 50,000 students protest the lack of democracy. What they're really protesting is IRGC corruption. But you can't say that out loud. Crushed. 2009 to 2010, the Green Movement. People back a reformist candidate. He loses. Protesters suspect the IRGC rigged the election. Violent suppression by the Revolutionary Guards. After this, faith in democracy collapses, and subsequent presidents become essentially regime puppets. 2023. A young woman named Mahsa Amini is arrested for failing to wear a head covering in public. She dies in custody, beaten, by all indications. Mass protests sweep the country. Here's the irony. The more people protest, the more powerful the IRGC becomes, because amid widespread unrest, the regime depends on whichever force is most reliably loyal, and the IRGC's loyalty is not in question. Now you can see the logic. If Khamenei dies and a new Ayatollah comes to power, that new Ayatollah will need to build his own power base. Standard practice. Bring in your own people. Reduce the influence of the previous leader's loyalists. The IRGC was loyal to Khamenei personally. A new Ayatollah, Raisi, would be a direct threat to the IRGC's monopoly. But if Mojtaba Khamenei succeeds his father, things stay the same. The IRGC keeps its grip on the economy. So that's the motive question answered. The IRGC has the strongest reason to want Raisi out of the line of succession. A student asked me a sharp question here. Why would the IRGC believe they can control Mojtaba? 2 reasons. First, when Khamenei became supreme leader after the first Ayatollah died in 1989, he made cultivating the IRGC his top priority. There are about 250,000 of them, and he made a point of meeting them, memorizing their names, even the names of their children. They are personally his. Second, and this is the key, Mojtaba himself is deeply unpopular. He's not a clever politician. If he were, he'd already be the obvious successor. He's not. Which means that the only way he becomes Ayatollah is if the IRGC puts him there. And someone installed by the IRGC has to remain loyal to the IRGC. That dependence is the leash. It's tempting to picture the IRGC as just a corrupt military mafia. They are corrupt. But they are also fanatics, religious revolutionaries with a long memory. Go back to November 1979. The Shah has fled to America. Iranians have 2 fears. that he'll escape justice for his human rights crimes, and, based on the precedent of 1953, when the CIA helped overthrow Iran's democratically elected government and installed the Shah, that America will invade and put him back on the throne. So 300 to 500 students storm the U.S. Embassy and take 53 Americans hostage. There's overwhelming public support. Khamenei backs the students. The authorities don't intervene. Now, when an embassy is overrun, the first thing diplomats do is shred all the secret documents. Tens of thousands of pages, cut into about 100 strips each. So what did the students do? Over months, slowly and methodically, they pieced the documents back together, one by one. What those documents revealed, to the students and eventually to the public, was that the real center of power in Iran had not been the Shah's palace. It had been the U.S. Embassy. The embassy had directed policy. The embassy had been behind the brutality of the regime. The embassy had organized the 1953 coup. These students became fanatics, and they didn't stay students. They became the top military leaders of Iran. 3 names: Hossein Dehgan, Minister of Defense from 2013 to 2017, Mohammad Ali Jafari, head of the IRGC from 2007 to 2019, Mohammad Bagheri, still Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces. All embassy hostage takers, all people who genuinely believe America is the great Satan and that war with America is, eventually, righteous. When Saddam invaded in 1980, Iran barely had an army. The IRGC had purged the officer corps as Shah loyalists, arrested, exiled, or executed. Saddam had tanks, planes, soldiers. Everyone expected a quick war. So the IRGC built a new army from scratch. The Basij, volunteers, poor religious villagers from the countryside. Khomeini told them, "We don't have weapons, but we have God. The Iraqis have armor, we have divine power." These boys were 16, 17, 18 years old. Each got a rifle and a key on a string around his neck. The key was your entry to heaven, because dying in this war granted automatic admission. They were organized into groups of about 22. They ran straight across Iraqi minefields. Tanks shot at them. Helicopters strafed them. They kept running. Most died. But the Iraqi army burned through so much ammunition trying to stop them that it became exhausted. Iraq withdrew. Iran took the war into Iraqi territory. This is the source of Iranian military power, not technology. The IRGC, run by fanatics, supported by tens of millions of Basij, poor, illiterate religious volunteers willing to die. After the Iran-Iraq war, the IRGC drew a strategic conclusion. If war comes to Iran, Iranians die. Better to take the fight outward. So for the past 20 to 30 years, they've built what they call the axis of resistance. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the Assad regime in Syria, Shia militias in Iraq. The money the IRGC extracts from the Iranian economy flows out to these proxies to keep pressure on Saudi Arabia, the U.S., and Israel. And here's the inflection point. There are Iranians, politicians, ordinary citizens, who look at this and ask, why are we doing this? If we withdrew from these conflicts and focused on our economy, Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United States wouldn't have a reason to attack us. Maybe the problem isn't America. Maybe the problem is the fanatics inside our own system. We have evidence this faction exists. When Soleimani was killed in January 2020, Iran's actual response was muted. The IRGC wanted vengeance, wanted war. But politicians, Raisi among them, plausibly, counseled patience. Going to war with the U.S. and Israel right now is suicide. April 1st of this year, the Damascus embassy strike. 2 IRGC generals dead. Again, the guards push for escalation. Again, the political class restrains them. Be patient. Our time will come. To a fanatic, restraint looks like cowardice, like weakness. like betrayal of the revolution. Let's get rid of them. Then, on May 19th, fog over the mountains. Opportunity. I don't know what happened. The accident remains the most probable explanation. But if you run the game theory question, who benefits from Raisi's death? The IRGC sits at the top of the list. Removing Raisi makes Mojtaba Khamenei the likely next supreme leader. Even if his accession produces a legitimacy crisis, that crisis makes the regime more dependent on the only force that can suppress unrest, which is the IRGC itself. Heads they win, tails they win. A student asked, "Does the army still exist?" Yes, the regular army still exists. But the IRGC controls the highest value functions. They run the Navy, which matters because of the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic shipping lane, and because the Navy enables smuggling and self-enrichment. They run the missile program, where most of Iran's military spending actually goes. And they run foreign policy in the form of the axis of resistance. Soleimani and the two Damascus generals were all IRGC. Money, missiles, proxies. That's the country. Another student asked the question I think matters most. So what? If it was an accident, in theory, nothing changes. Khamenei still sets policy. But if I'm right, and this was a planned IRGC operation, the political class is being displaced and the military class is taking over. You should expect a presidential election in late June. The most likely winner is the current vice president, Mohammad Mokbar. This matters because Raisi came from the judiciary, a different power base. Mokbar comes from the IRGC. He'll advance their interests. Rhetoric will shift toward total war. Crackdowns on dissent will get harsher. Now, the IRGC cannot defeat the United States in open battle. America has shock and awe, air supremacy, satellite surveillance, special forces. Attacking America directly is suicide. The only path to victory is to lure America into invading Iran on Iranian terms. To bait that invasion, watch for 4 moves. First, accelerate the nuclear program. The U.S. and Israel both treat an Iranian nuclear weapon as an existential red line. So accelerating, it is direct provocation. Second, unleash the proxies. Hezbollah opens a serious northern front against Israel. Shia militias hit U.S. bases in Iraq. The Houthis intensify strikes on Saudi oil infrastructure. From Washington's perspective, this becomes a single problem. The head of the snake is in Tehran. Third, disrupt shipping lanes. Fourth, a terror campaign against America and its allies abroad. If I'm right, look for Mokbar to win in late June with sharply more extremist rhetoric. Avenge Soleimani, take the fight to America, and for Middle East violence to escalate across all 4 channels. But, and this is important, even if all of this happens, it does not prove the IRGC killed Raisi. The implication runs one way only. If they killed him, then you'd expect to see this pattern. Seeing the pattern is consistent with the theory. It doesn't confirm it. Everything I've said here is speculation. I have no evidence. Raisi died, and it was probably an accident. But if it wasn't, the actor with the strongest motive is the IRGC, because Raisi as supreme leader would have threatened their monopoly. And really, any new leader would eventually move against them. They have too much power. They generate too much foreign tension. They are too fanatical. Which is exactly why elevating Mojtaba Khamenei serves them. He's unpopular enough that he would owe them everything. Next class, we'll look at what an actual U.S.-Iran war would look like. I've said all semester that the United States would lose that war. I have never said Iran would win it. That war would be brutal for Iran. Tens of millions could die, for no reason. Which is exactly why people like Raisi were saying, let's not go to war. See you next week.